Welcome to reading every X-Men comic ever for event number 2, Secret Wars 2. That's right, after weeks of its shadow looming over me, it is finally here, and as I predicted, it's not good. Before I get too into the weeds on my thoughts, let me zoom out for a moment for those of you who may not necessarily be comic people. Secret Wars 2 started in April of 1985 and was the second large-scale Marvel Comics event ever, and a sequel to the original Marvel Superhero Secret Wars event. It ran until December of that year and had at least one tie-in issue with pretty much every superhero ongoing that they had at the time. If you don't know what a tie-in is, it's pretty self-explanatory, but it's a comic that ties into a larger ongoing event. This could be one or more issues of a current ongoing, like we see in this event, or it could be a miniseries that is made specifically for said event. We see this a lot in more modern events. This event, Secret Wars 2, had 33 tie-ins, resulting in a total of 42 issues for the whole thing. Now, I only read 23 of the full 42, and honestly, I could have read less, and nothing of consequence would have been lost. Hell, I probably could have skipped this event and nothing of consequence would have been lost. The main book for Secret Wars 2 is bafflingly stupid, with most of the established characters that appear being either out of character or just kind of aggressive for no reason. There's no long-lasting effects or status quo changes to the universe as a whole, meaning the whole thing doesn't matter and it's essentially pointless. The tie-in issues for the event are significantly better, but can be a bit repetitive with the messaging and rarely actually matter to the larger event at hand. I mean, I didn't read all of them because that would have been too many, and I can't imagine the ones I skipped over were significantly better than the ones I read. Obviously, I read the 9-issue Secret Wars 2 miniseries by Jim Shooter and Al Milgrom, but I also read the 3 New Mutants and Uncanny X-Men tie-in issues, 3 of the 4 Avengers tie-ins, 1 of their Fantastic Four tie-ins, and then the ROM, Daredevil, Dazzler, and Doctor Strange tie-ins. I will be covering everything I read as always, but instead of doing them in the order I read them, I'm going to cover the main Secret Wars 2 series first, and then all the tie-ins after that. It's just easier for me that way. I'm also going to try and keep the recaps much shorter than usual, mainly so that this video will be under an hour. Normally, before the recap, I recommend reading the book beforehand if you care about spoilers, which you can do. In this one, I don't think it's going to matter. This book is not great. I don't really think you should read it, except for maybe some of the X-Men tie-ins. Otherwise, maybe save yourself the trouble if you don't care that much. Secret Wars 2 begins with the Beyonder coming to Earth to understand humanity, and specifically, desire. Chuck is afraid of this and summons the X-Men, the New Mutants, Magneto, and Captain America to Los Angeles to find him. Chaos ensues, the X-Men get split up, and the Beyonder disappears. That's just the first issue, and there are already errors in both the art and writing that bug me. First off, when the X-Men go to leave for LA, Colossus states that their plane needs to be repaired, which is why they can't use it. If you've been keeping up with New Mutants, you'll know this is wrong, because their plane's in fucking Ireland, with Chuck and half the New Mutants. Second, when everyone is fighting the Beyonder, Illyana gets forcibly turned into Darkchild. So, she teleports to Limbo, taking some of the others with her. But then Logan yells at the Beyonder like he was the one who teleported them, which would mean Logan does not know what Illyana's powers are. Which I feel like he should, on like a basic level. Now, I know she only came out as a mutant to the X-Men in issue 188, which was when Logan and Kitty were both in Japan, but like, someone had to have told them after they returned, right? I mean, Illyana hangs out with the X-Men all the time. She's Colossus' brother and Kitty's best friend. There's no way he doesn't know what her powers are. Oh, Christ. I'm only on the first issue still. I need to pick up the pace here, Jesus Christ. Let's speedrun this shit. The Beyonder travels around New York asking various superheroes what the meaning of life is, and Spider-Man has to teach him how to use the bathroom. He then meets a gangster who names him Frank and teaches him about the world and how it works. Frank then proceeds to rule the world briefly until he discovers the joy of being selfless. How is it that a gangster teaches the Beyonder more about the universe than the actual superheroes do? What the fuck is this? Anyways, the Beyonder, like the band Foreigner, wants to know what love is, so he chooses Dazzler as his mate and tries to court her the only way he knows how, a show of power. And shocker, that doesn't work. Depressed after his rejection by Dazzler, the Beyonder befriends a young mutant named Tabitha, who he takes on a cosmic road trip, and then fights the Celestials. Yes, those Celestials, just for the hell of it. After he gets bored with that, the Beyonder moves to Illinois and becomes a champion of life, and in doing so he kills Death, much to the dismay of the entire Marvel Pantheon and the literal devil. After that, he's told by the Molecule Man why it's a bad thing and why things need to die, at which point he turns a guy named Dave back into Death. Don't worry though, Dave volunteered. This is also never brought up again in any other Marvel comic, so shout out to Dave, I guess. After killing and reviving Death, the Beyonder decides to sit on an island and reflect on what he's done. Meanwhile, the Devil's back, and he has a plan involving every villain ever to attack the Beyonder, but it doesn't work, because he also had the idea to power up and recruit the Thing who defends the Beyonder. After all of his thinking, and some impromptu therapy from the Molecule Man, the Beyonder still can't make sense of the multiverse or this whole desire business, and is so pissed off by it that he decides the only answer is to destroy everything. However, he has second thoughts on the thing and instead tries out being human, which he finds novel. But on his third time through the birthing machine, every hero ever attacks. The Molecule Man destroys the birthing machine and kills the baby Beyonder, but forces the Beyonder's energy into the empty universe that was the Beyonder's home, which in turn creates a whole new universe. This ending's weird as fuck. And now, you see what I mean when this series is all over the place and not real fun to read. The Beyonder as a character is really stupid most of the time, which doesn't make sense considering he has nigh omniscience on top of being omnipotent. How can a man understand how to control matter at a subatomic level, but need to be told not to eat glass? On top of that, he acts wildly different with each issue, and there was so little character consistency with him that you just end up confused most of the time. And while the Tines do kinda help in that regard, I shouldn't have to read them to understand the motivations and character growth of the main goddamn character. Also, a minor gripe I have with the series is that this is why the character of Circuit Breaker, a human villain made specifically for the Marvel Transformers comic run, stayed at Marvel when they lost the Transformers license. She appeared in this book for one panel, and then that was enough to say that she was a Marvel property. A property Marvel proceeded never to use again, despite the fact that she could have easily been made into a rogue or antihero for a myriad of other Marvel characters. Anyways, let's get back to the tie-ins, because I'm tired of talking about this mid-as-fuck series. We start with New Mutants 30 and X-Men 196, both of which take place after Secret Wars 2 number 1. 90% of New Mutants is just a continuation of the Glide Eaters arc that started in issue 29, and it's also the first instance of Kitty being able to wield Illyana's soul sword, which comes into play later. Unfortunately, though, it's not the end of the arc, so we'll have to see the conclusion to it next week. In Uncanny X-Men, the X-Men look for a group of would-be murderers at a college campus, unaware that Charles is the would-be victim because he's a mutant. Rachel almost kills them in retaliation, but Magneto steps in first before she can. This is a very, very good issue. This is also one of the few times Nightcrawler shows up in this entire event. Our next pair of ties is Avengers 260 and Daredevil 233, both of which take place after Secret Wars 2 issue 3. Avengers puts us in the middle of an arc revolving around the Avengers and the Skrulls and their fight against Nebula, only for the Beyonder to show up and screw up her capture. On the flip side, Daredevil is somehow both predictable and kind of insane. The Beyonder comes to the law offices of Nelson and Murdoch to hire them as lawyers so he can lawfully rule the entire world. As a form of advance payment, he gives Matt Murdock his sight back, until Matt requests it be taken away again. After Dazzler's romantic adventure with the Beyonder in Secret Wars 2 issue 4, she's returned to bounty hunter OZ Chase in Dazzler 40, but a trio of bikers decides to interfere. The Beyonder appears, trying to help, but only escalates the situation. As weird as this issue is, it is one of the better Dazzler issues, especially recently, and a pretty average tie-in for this event. I'm not sure if that says more about the current state of Dazzler run, or just how poor this event is. From there, we move on to ROM 72, which I read because, well, it's ROM. If you have the choice between reading ROM and not reading ROM, you read ROM. It's Comics Law. He's just that cool. Unfortunately, however, ROM is not in this issue. Instead, we get Rick Jones, Cindy Adams, and Brandy Clark, all of which are victims of the Wraith War, and wish for life to be different. The Beyonder seeks to grant their wishes to see if they feel a sense of completeness afterwards, but they explain that's not really how desire works. Despite the fact that the Space Knight himself doesn't appear, it's still a pretty good issue. However, that's where the streak of good tie-ins ends, as we get to Avengers 261, which is exceedingly pointless, which I think is saying something for this event. The Avengers minus Star Fox return from their space mission and come in contact with the Beyonder, who they offer a position on the team, which he declines. I don't hate it, but I didn't need to read it. I felt like this was a tie-in for the sake of a tie-in and nothing else. After Secret Wars 2 number 5, we have Doctor Strange Volume 2, issue 74, and Fantastic Four issue 285. In Doctor Strange, the Beyonder seeks out the titular character, and also the bottom of a bottle, to learn enlightenment. But the truth to enlightenment is not one the Beyonder finds satisfying. And then he leaves. Fantastic Four, on the other hand, is a fascinating read. Instead of a normal superhero story, we get a story about a young kid named Tommy Hansen who admires the Human Torch and goes so far as to light himself on fire. Johnny Storm takes it personally when the kid doesn't make it and decides not to be a hero anymore. It is, of course, until the Beyonder shows up and shows him the past and the truth of what he meant to the kid. This is the only time we ever see the Beyonder like this, which is a shame because it's a much more interesting version of him than the one we primarily get. Skipping forward, post Secret Wars 2 number 7, we have New Mutants 30 and X-Men 202. In New Mutants, demons start invading, but Illyana's been cleansed thanks to the Beyonder, so her power goes to Kitty, who's not good with them. Meaning Illyana has to reject the gift she was given in order to save her best friend and the world from demons. In Uncanny X-Men, Rachel goes after the Beyonder alone, but he decides to try and make her whole by having her save the X-Men from Sentinels, something she failed to do in her timeline. Our final two proper tie-ins, which take place between Secret Wars 2, 8, and 9, are New Mutants 37 and Uncanny X-Men 203. New Mutants is fucking wild because the Beyonder arrives at the mansion, pissed that they did not accept his teachings from last issue, and so he just kills the whole team. Minus Roberto, because he wasn't home. Not only does he kill all of them in various brutal ways, but he also wipes them from existence. Don't worry though, he does bring them back in Secret Wars 9, physically at least. He doesn't do anything about the memories he erased though, because why would he? In Uncanny X-Men 203, Rachel decides that destroying the universe is the only way to stop the Beyonder. And she convinces the X-Men to think the same. But in the end realizes that not only is life worth keeping, but that the Beyonder was using her as a means to an end. So instead, she shows the Beyonder the meaning of life. And it's the one time a hero gets through to the Beyonder in a way that actually changes his mind. So shout out to the X-Men for that. The last issue I read was Avengers 266, which functions as a sort of epilogue for the event, where in the aftermath of Secret Wars 2, the Avengers and Fantastic Four turn to the Silver Surfer and the Molecule Man to save the planet after all the damage done during the fight in the final issue. This has some great character moments, especially between Surfer and Molecule Man, but it's pretty alright. And there we go. That's all 14 times I read. Man, this really does feel like 2 episodes in one. Anyways, these were quite good for the most part. The definite highlights of the event for me were the X-Men and New Mutants ones. There is something very telling that my favorite issues were the ones where the Beyonder is so out of character from the main series that he actually becomes interesting as both a villain, like we see in Uncanny X-Men and New Mutants, and just a general benevolent guide to the universe like we see in Fantastic Four. Now we finally get to rankings, and there's a shit ton of them. For Secret Wars 2 proper, there's a lot of 5s and a couple of 6s, leading it to an average score of 5.3, putting it in between Iceman Volume 1 and X-Men Volume 1. The tie-ins where it really carry this event, with the New Mutants and Uncanny X-Men ones all getting 8s and 9s, and all the other ones mainly getting 7s, with the exception of that one Avengers issue with a 6, and the Fantastic Four issue with an 8. Speaking of these tie-ins, we can actually add a bunch to the completed series list, with Daredevil, Doctor Strange, and Rom all getting 7, because they only had one issue and it was a 7. Fantastic Four Volume 1 ends with a 6.5, putting it with Scarlet Witch and Vision, and Avengers Volume 1 ends with a 5.8, just under the original Secret Wars series. As a reminder, for these non-X-Men related comics, these rankings are not based on the whole series, just the average ranking of the 1 or more issues of each comic run I read. The full runs could be better, or worse, I don't know, I'm not reading them. So, final thoughts? Secret Wars 2 feels like an event for the sake of having an event that was bigger than the last one. The sheer amount of tie-ins, regardless of quality, is kind of staggering, but they don't help the event itself from feeling lackluster, confusing, and inconsistent. I knew going in that this event was rough, and despite that, I can't help but feel a little disappointed with just how easily I would recommend the original event over its sequel. Especially considering I don't think the original is that good either. On that note, that's all for this week. If you've gotten all the way through this video, I really, really appreciate it. And if you had liked it, please hit any of the buttons below. If you have any thoughts or questions, leave them in the comments. I would love to hear them and maybe answer them. The entire playlist is in the description, and subscribe to stay tuned for the next one, where I will fill in the gaps between X-Men issues during this event. See you then.